If you look at a map of melanoma, skin cancer cases, it's all in the Northern Hemisphere. So the countries that have the highest strength sunlight in the world all year round, nearly no cases of skin cancer. Because in the Northern Hemisphere, well, first of all, we don't get enough. And when we do get it, we put sunglasses, hats and sunscreen on. This rapid acceleration of industrialization and housing and healthcare, and before all that, for a long, long time, all we had was nature. The science around the decrease in inflammation in the body by spending an hour with your feet on the ground. I take this medication and 3 weeks after taking it, I basically can't walk from my bed to the toilet. I had this like neuropathy in my skin. A lot of people kill themselves after taking it because of the severity of the symptoms. How could it honestly be prescribed by doctors on the market and be that dangerous?
To Catamania. I know that you guys are going to absolutely love this episode because my guest today is amazing and I know that he's going to inspire you and his story will absolutely fascinate you. It fascinated me, and to the point of, I was like, I absolutely have to sit down and talk to this person no matter what. So I'm sitting down in a conversation with Mr. Luca here. And I wanted to ask you guys to, as per usual, remember to like, comment, hit the subscribe button, whatever you need to do to help this podcast grow. It means more than you know. And without further ado, Mr. Luca, welcome to your own space.
Yeah, thank you for the warm welcome. Yes. Welcome to my home. Glad to have you guys here and looking forward to the discussion today.
Likewise.
Yeah.
You and I got to connect a little bit prior to sitting down and having this. We're going to pretend like the cameras aren't there because usually when I focus on the fact that like, oh my God, this is a podcast and we have a camera, as much as I have to do it, but we're going to pretend like they're not there.
Okay.
You and I connected and you shared a little bit about your story. And the first thing I said to you, one of the first things that I said to you when I saw you in person, when I met you in person, was that I can't believe that 4 years ago you went through something that you told me you had gone through. Please share the story.
Yeah, it's a similar reaction that I get, when I am meeting especially people for the first time, and obviously outwardly I'm looking okay. I'm pretty normal, so I understand that reaction, and it's been that way almost actually from the beginning. In the early days, I'll explain obviously in detail what happened, but even during the worst of it, I was actually not necessarily, my appearance wasn't too drastic and too alarming. It was the problem has always been like internal and almost a cellular issue. And when you think about people with autoimmunity issues and like neurodegenerative conditions, a lot of that is invisible. A lot of that isn't like, it's not a rash, it's not a broken arm, it's not a missing leg.
It's something like so internal that you have.
Yeah. And that's actually part of the struggle of people living with these conditions is they would probably receive a lot more help, compassion, and connection if it was so, glaringly obvious and so loud in their appearance. It might actually attract more sympathy, whatever. And there's a loneliness in that space, but
do you think it's a bit more dismissive of that?
I think people are inherently bad natured and unsympathetic. I think it's hard to connect to.
Right.
I think how can you have to walk the line. You have to know you have to feel something. You have to experience it to resonate with it. And a lot of people are just a combination of their life experience, the way they walk, the way they talk. I can't, at this stage, and the understanding I have in the journey, you have to understand that people can't go into these things with you. You definitely want support, you want love, especially from family, close people. But the longer any of these health conditions or states of suffering go on, there is a point of acceptance that humans are limited in their own capacity in terms of their life experience and their awareness. And there's a lot of things that I can't relate to, that people go through. And they can sit and talk the words and tell me the story, but to really understand their experience is very difficult. So I don't really necessarily think that anybody's lacks compassion. That's just what it is in that aspect. But to refocus on my story, I was about 30. and I was in the city of London, or UK, just outside London, and I'd been there for a long time, most of my life, and I was involved in running of a company, and I was a young man in a fairly unique position. You know, it was a rather large operation and a lot of responsibility, and I was very much, I had some role models in my life. You know, my father was a hard worker, and I very much emulated him in his behaviour and his work ethic and morals.
And you guys were immigrants from Italy?
Yeah, I mean, my family have moved around a lot. I mean, going back 2 generations, my grandfather left Italy, actually went to Canada for some time, went to Alaska, New York. They did a lot of the traditional Italian-American routes. And then they went to London, and you know, we really have moved around as a collective, but there's a big origin of our family in Italy from my father's side. My mother is Scottish English, it's actually not the reason why my father ended up in the UK. My grandfather married an English woman in Canada, and after many years in New York and moving around the States, she dragged him back to the UK to be with her family. She missed her sisters. And
I was going to speculate that they left Canada because it was so cold there.
yeah, I think that must have been part of it.
They were like, no, we're not doing it.
Yeah,
especially like with Italian heritage.
Yeah.
Why would Italians leave Italy anyways?
That Mediterranean blood, you know, we do thrive in the sun.
Yeah.
And it is a fish out of water. You know, I was in England for a long time, and I never felt biologically matched to that environment. I did feel like I suffered in that cold.
Have you ever seen that video of footage of Tuscany?
Yes, I think I know what you're saying.
Yeah, like footage, Tuscany, right? Like just Google Tuscany if you haven't been there.
Yeah.
And it's like, can't believe that Italians would have this and choose to go to New Jersey.
Yeah.
Like what?
Yeah, it's interesting, and like it's funny because on that topic, a lot of the generations, the grandchildren, and all those guys that left for a better life, a lot of them are going home to Italy.
Yeah.
And the families are confused by that. You know, we went through all this struggle to give you a better economy and life, and a lot of the guys want that simple, traditional, authentic, ancestral life now. So it's a very interesting movement that's actually reversing that now. Yeah. And I can see why. I mean, I'm living somewhere warm now. I've left the UK, and it does have a big impact on your quality of life and happiness, and especially with ancestral blood that was developed in those hot climates. You know.
Yeah. I
think you're more conditioned if you have 10 generations in the cold. So
have you ever taken a DNA test?
I took one of those DNA tests, the 23andMe.
Yeah.
I did that a long time ago.
Are you like 100% Italian?
No, I'm a mix.
Italiano vero.
Yeah, I'm a mix. I'm definitely a mix. There's like English, Italian, Irish a little bit. I think even some Baltic or... Yeah. I think so. I have to recheck. But I'm
it's
definitely
mainly like southern sun craving.
Southern Italy was a big part of it.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm mainly Slavic and I crave the sun.
I feel it in my essence. I feel it's part of my identity, my blood. Mm-hmm. I thrive in the sun.
Yeah.
I must be part lizard too or something. So yeah. I grew up in England because of all that backstory and the family moving around. They settled in England. My father married an English Scottish woman he met out of university, and they had 4 boys. I'm one of those boys. And
4 boys.
4 boys.
Ooh.
Yeah, I've got 3 brothers, two big brothers and 1 younger brother, and they've all got their own unique stories, and they're good men, and I think that's a reflection of my parents and the values and the upbringing. So I'm grateful for the origin story I have. Yeah. I came from good people, came from people that had great intentions and deeply cared about the outcome of their children and our lives, and they really invested in us, continue to do so. So that's a blessing. Yeah.
And you saw them work hard through your childhood.
Saw them work very hard. Yeah. I mean, they, in 1 generation, turned it around.
Yeah. Is that where you think your drive came from? Was it looking at your parents?
I think that was a lot. I think they showed me, which I wasn't seeing in my community much amongst my peers, they showed me the ability to create something from nothing, entrepreneurship and, like taking risks. Yeah. My dad was taking risks, always took risks. Accumulate to speculate, and my mother was a mother of 4 boys who started a chain of nursery schools for children in her 20s. And that's that's in a different generation, different era. So they were thinking out the box. They were really trying to, they weren't really happy with the salary 9 to 5. Take what you're given. They were creative. And that was good to see for me.
Yeah,
good to
absolutely.
see. Because all my, I look around at the people I grew up with and people I went to school with, and I definitely had a unique path compared to a lot of those guys. A lot of those guys were indoctrinated in the go to school, go to university, the very traditional path, and actually on the other end of that, the opportunities and the salaries and the lifestyles, they weren't actually what was promised to them. I think there was a generation of guys that felt let down.
Right.
After following that path.
There's almost like a crisis that people experience for sure. Like a lot of millennials, I've noticed that as well. They kind of have an expectation of what that lifestyle will bring them. And then once they realize that that's not really what's happening, all sorts of issues arise.
Especially in this generation, like we are in such a pinnacle forefront of change. You look at technology, you look at these industries that just didn't exist 20 years ago, 10 years ago. We are the generation of possibility. These guys making millions on TikTok, on whatever, and
I always say I wish my grandma was here to know that there's people making millions of dollars on TikTok lip syncing.
Yeah, they wouldn't understand it.
Why didn't I start lip syncing?
They wouldn't understand
of course not. Times are different, absolutely, but it's definitely very interesting, and I think our generation definitely figured out how to. Like, I feel like millennials are very hardworking, but we also have a very strong sense of like what our life wants to look like, and a lot of us won't stop until we pursue that, in the sense that like we do think outside of the box. We have seen certain things. We've seen how our parents maybe have struggled. So it's a very interesting.
I think we got the best of both.
Yeah.
Pre-tech, we had a childhood outdoors. We were raised by people with great values, work ethic, and then we also had all of this opportunity and ability to create and think outside the box and be our own bosses at a young age. That was a hell of a revolution. And the generation after us, they were born into that world. They didn't really see the last of the old world. And I remember there being like black and white TVs in my grandmother's house, and I remember the cell phones showed up when I was 14, 15, 16. So yeah, we definitely have a unique eye for the world.
Do you think you've reached that level now, where you think of the other generation that came after us and you think to yourself, like, we had it better, or we had it like...
It's terrible.
Right?
It's terrible.
I used to not understand how people could ever say that or think that, and now I'm like, oh, damn, I kind of get it.
I feel like, I feel a dinosaur in my own right. I see these things happening, AI and these kids and what they're doing, and I consider myself definitely capable and intelligent and coherent, but some of this stuff is just we weren't exposed to it. It's hard to catch up in a way. It's moving so fast, and you get good at a craft. You hone a process, you get good at something, you pursue something, whatever it is in life. You choose something and you try and be good at it, and you spend so much time in that tunnel, fixated on that path, and there's all this stuff going on around you. You can get left behind in many ways.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I find it fascinating. I don't demonize the change or technology. I don't think it's evil.
The only constant, right? Like the super cliche phrase that it's the only constant.
Yeah,
change.
you have to embrace it, or what is it? What else is there? You're going to complain about it and be the guy that wants everything to stay the same. Well, then you're not going to be very happy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you kind of embarked on the journey of taking a lot of personal responsibility when you were very young. And I know you shared a little bit about how much stress you had at a young age. What drove, at what point, I guess, did you see that things are going sideways? And at what point did you realize
the downside of that?
Yeah.
It's just so interesting because you asked me at different points in my life and there's different answers. And honestly, if we had this conversation 2 years ago, my answer would be drastically different. And as I sit here today, I feel like compelled to speak from a place of like wanting to be loved and accepted and appreciated, especially by my family, especially by my father. Wanting him to see me, wanting him to witness my power, my capability, my intelligence, all these things. I really think, looking back, that you can talk about the want of nice things, economically, materialism. You can talk about all that, and that definitely came into it as a young guy. When we're in our ego in our 20s and we're, kicking ass and taking names and taking over the world, you know, that phase of life, you're just full of testosterone and all these.
But I will say sometimes it can be misdirected. So it sounds like you actually had a sense of direction at an age where a lot of men don't have it. They're very easily impressed, right? That by maybe not the best ideas sometimes. So it sounds like you actually had
I definitely made my mistakes. I definitely had my time. You know, I didn't get to where I am without falling down and getting up. I didn't. So I don't want to paint that picture. I wasted a lot of money. I wasted a lot of time. I made bad decisions. But that is actually not to be regretted. You know, all of that is exactly part of the understanding I have now, and my viewpoint of the world now. You know, you have to walk down a road to realize it's the wrong direction. You know, looking at parenthood and looking at guiding children, I realized like there's nothing you can say to them. There's no words and instructions, and you know.
Nobody wrote a manual, like a guidelines manual on how to,
And even if you've got those words, you know, this is how you should do it, and this is how you're going to be happy and safe and successful. Children do not take that on. That just goes like this over their head. They learn from witnessing a role model and an inspiration.
Right.
And that's been a progressive lesson for me. It took me a long time, you know. As I say, trial and error, making mistakes, and I feel like I emulated my role models, my father, the strong male figures in my life, and that definitely helped. You know, when you're talking about other people and making mistakes, and me having a clearer path, I definitely benefited from having great role models and inspiration, and I got to give myself some credit. You know, I was obviously capable to an extent and contributed to my own outcomes, but. It's difficult. It's difficult to sit in any sort of ego. When you've been through a health issue, I have such a unique perspective because of the health thing. The health is a great neutralizer. The health is a gift of perspective constantly, because actually it really filters what's important. And
it's like that phrase, you know, you can have 99 problems until you have a health problem, and then you only have one problem.
It's the only problem. And so that's been a gift. It's been a gift in many ways. The suffering has been a teacher. It's really, you know, a lot of conversations I have with guys older than me. I had a dinner last night with a guy in his 60s, and he said, you know, the things you speak on and the lessons you've learned, it took me a lifetime. It takes most guys till their deathbed. You know, really fast-tracked perspective on what is important for me in life, and you know, it's been. You know, I don't want to jump around, and to finish that conversation, like we were speaking about the drive and success. I mean, I'm going to go in order. Back then, I really wanted to be respected within my unit, within my crew, my family, my community. I wanted to be something. I wanted to be worthy. I wanted to be attractive. I wanted to be what every young male desires. You know, I wanted to build. I wanted to create. I wanted the house, the car, the money. I did want those things because that was the measure of success in my environment. That was what we were taught means that you are somebody.
Yeah. Very Eastern European mentality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty global, you know.
Before I get attacked, I know Italians are not Eastern Europeans, but I've mentioned before on numerous occasions, we have a lot of similarities.
Yeah, Italians have vanity. Yes. Italians have status craving, and they have ego for sure. We are people that really admire beauty. You know, we are passionate, we are all those things. So
Eastern Europeans will like not have food, but they'll have the latest BMW. Exactly. It's like a running joke, right?
Yeah. So and like
number one priority.
Yeah. And what's underneath all that? It's the same thing. We all crave like safety, connection, admiration, respect. Like there's stuff underneath these behaviors. It's not all like, it's not that people are inherently bad in any form. It's actually like a very primal, very ancient craving to be part of something, to be revered, to be, you know, because if you're not respected and admired, you're not going to get a partner. You know, you go back to biology, you're not going to get a mate, you're not going to make children and procreate, you're not going to be accepted in the village, and you might be cast out and starve in the jungle, you know. So it is a very primal thing, even though they're manifesting in modern ways, modern behaviors, Rolex watches and Rolls-Royce cars. Actually, fundamentally, the behaviors are rooted in connection, safety, survival, and I don't think anybody's inherently operating from a bad place. And I have to forgive myself for that. I was in that space. I was in the space of materialism, and I laugh at myself now. But you have to experience it. No one can tell you. for you. No one can live it for you. No one can say, you're going to regret it. You have to fall over and feel it and realize you have to taste it. This isn't right. This isn't what's for me. And actually, it's okay too. Like if that is for you and you're living that life and you worked really hard and you had nothing, and that's actually okay too.
Yeah.
There's no right and wrong and judgment there at all.
Yeah.
It's just where I'm at. I'm now today in a different place. But
right.
Big part of my story was, it's all rooted in my dad, really, male to male. That admiration, because my dad was a busy guy and sacrificed a lot of himself and his own wants and needs for his responsibilities and family, kids. He had 4 boys, and he had a tough upbringing, and he was taught the way that you get ahead and receive respect and admiration was to work very hard and achieve and be somebody intellectually in the business world. That was his morals that his parents passed on, and again, nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. You go back to my grandparents, and they were extremely poor, and you work very hard to change that situation, don't you? And I can understand the behaviours. Mm-hmm. Why my dad dedicated his life to work and success and achieving, and I was almost trying to just grab a bit of his attention, I guess, because he was doing it for me. He wasn't doing it for himself. He never had anything for himself. He didn't care about what he wore. He didn't care about what he tried. He never did anything for anyone but others. But as a little boy, you want him. You don't care about what he's bringing. You want them, don't you? So, and I didn't realize that for a long time. I just emulated him.
It's actually very interesting. That was like the main driver.
The main driver. It wasn't actually to have the success, I don't think, even though it felt like it was at the time, even though I was enjoying it. Having nice things more than my friends. I had nicer things than my friends. We had a nicer house. We had all these things, and that felt good. Ego. It feels good. I think underneath it, my dad and also my big brothers, same thing. 2 older brothers growing up, they're super cool. They're heroes in the home. They're friends coming around, and there is a huge level of like, I want to be like these guys,
right.
Or I want them to bring me with them. Let me play, let me hang out, So I think a lot of my behaviours, to be introspective and look within, a lot of my drive, why I've done things, why I've behaved certain ways, has been just for recognition and acceptance within my family unit, and beyond that, my friends, my community. And that can spin a negative route. Like when you don't receive it and you're working so hard to get it, a lot of the mistakes I've made and the behaviours that I hold regret around have been rooted in the same thing, where I almost acted out, or I turned my back on them, or I got aggressive with them, or, I didn't feel any connection and reciprocation of my admiration, or they weren't giving me their time. And that's all bullshit. That's all my stuff. None of that is them. They're living their life. They're doing their best. They're figuring it out. They're not, the whole way through, they've never done anything wrong. It's my projection onto them of what I feel they should be giving me.
Like a void that you needed them to fill in a way.
Totally. Mm-hmm. And I'm working on that relationship now with my dad, my mum. I've got a lot of work to do with my brothers, and I'm really hoping to do that work. But the sickness, to go full circle, the sickness and the experience, I wouldn't have got anywhere near these concepts without that. I would have been distracted in my busy life, making money, getting married, having my babies, doing the thing. And so that's part of the gift, isn't it? It's the gift of time. It's the gift of introspection and reflection. And why am I behaving like this? Why historically have I done these things? Why do I have fractured relationships in my life with my family, with certain friends? What's the core of that? And actually the gift of it is, it's all coming from me. And the reason that's a gift is because that's something you can influence, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you're creating an experience and drawing things to you, you also have the power to change that and transform that. So
that's obviously something that came later for you, right?
Later. It's a very recent thing.
Yeah.
I'd say actually the last year or two.
Yeah.
And I'm jumping around a bit, but it's so hard not to speak about one and not the other.
Yeah.
But it is a new concept. And I had to put a lot of things down. For a long time, there was a lot of victim mindset. When I got sick, I was in the prime of my life. I was a young, strong, healthy man. I had everything. I had a beautiful fiance. I had a lovely house. I had a beautiful Range Rover. I had all these fancy things.
How old were you when you
I was
started
like,
to feel?
I was like 30.
Okay.
And all the things that we were taught that we want,
Yeah.
I was winning. I was at the point where I'd done it.
Yeah.
Plenty of material things. Felt good about it. I was in great shape physically. I was about 210 pounds back then, you know, athlete, muscle, had all these things. And
Do you guys use pounds in the UK?
we say stones. So it's a very old measurement for weight. We don't say pounds. We say stones. So I would have said back then I was about 16, 17 stone, which
Okay.
must sound crazy to you guys.
We have kilograms. That's the only thing I know.
Kilograms,
So
okay.
whenever someone in Canada says like pounds or inches, I'm like, I don't know what you're
I
talking
was
about.
walking around
If I go to the
about-
States and they say Fahrenheit, I'm like, I'm not even, no, I can't.
Yeah, we don't do Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
It's funny,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
stones is a particularly British, strange one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Old school. But
So you were 16 stones.
I was
worth
about
of-
110 kilograms, so you can connect to that.
Okay. Pure muscle mass.
I was definitely
Pure stones.
I was definitely feeding my ego in the gym. Appearance was important. Externally, internally, everything was curated and intentional, and that was a big part of my identity. It's how I received admiration and love in my community.
How you felt confident.
How I felt confident, for sure. Because I definitely, as we all do developing as a young man, went through huge waves of insecurity, not liking my appearance, not liking the way I felt around females, the way I felt around my male friend. There's just all these roads of insecurity when you're developing teenage years. It's like almost unanimous throughout everyone, right? We
Yeah.
all go through that. So I combated that very hard. I went aggressively towards that to create an appearance and a character that I felt good in.
So everything looked good from the outside, is what you're saying.
Everything looked good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's funny because it really was all it was. It was everything was good on the outside, and internally I wasn't happy.
What was it? Was it the work was driving you stressed, or was it? At what point did it all kind of crack? If everything was.
I think there was a period, say the last 3 to 5 years of working in that business with the family. There were so many dynamics, and I was in a victim mindset, and I was so unhappy in my experience that I was looking for reasons to validate why I felt like that. And I was protecting myself by looking for external reasons and pointing the finger. So me and my older brother worked very closely, and that was a very hard dynamic because of my relationship with myself, essentially. I was not happy with my own circumstances, and I made decisions that I was holding him accountable for. So I would decide to be a martyr and self-sacrifice and work 7 days a week and push beyond what I felt I could do. And it was all because I wanted my dad to see me working myself to death and be like, what a good boy, respect him, that's my boy. It was all because I wanted to punish my brother, because I guess I felt deep down he didn't respect me or care about me, which is my shit, it's not his. It's not true, I know that, probably.
But it takes a lot of wisdom to realize that. And a lot of, many people walk around without even realizing that they're actually needing to do internal work rather than look outside, right?
And it's born from the suffering of ill health. All of this stuff, all of these concepts and all of these places that I get to these days with my inner work, it's all born from the suffering. Is a great equalizer. It cuts out the BS. You cannot focus on envy, jealousy, hate, resentment. There's no time or energy for it. You get to a point where you're in such a place of survival and you have so much going on, like you're actually being tortured and you're so ill and terrible experiences, that how could you waste any time or energy on these old things? And that actually transforms even ancient experiences that you've held for nearly your whole life. It gives you the gift of transformation in those spaces because you realize that you're creating your own suffering. When you really want to get well and you mean it, and the effort that's taking, when you come back from something that I came back from, and what that took, and the odds of me even functioning and being healthy are crazily low. So if I'm going to go on that journey and work so hard and perform a miracle, essentially, I must be a fool to carry that backpack of resentment and jealousy and hate with me. I have to shed that in the process. And that's one of the many gifts that this has given me is forgiveness for myself and for others. I had to forgive myself for a lot of things. I really I really made a lot of mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was being what everybody wanted me to be, and acting how everybody thought I should act, and I was confused. Why wasn't I receiving love and admiration for these behaviors? Why wasn't people seeing my hard work? Why weren't they respecting me? Why weren't they, meeting me in my needs and listening and really, I felt dismissed and misunderstood and disrespected. And actually, it was all me projecting the whole time. It was me projecting my own insecurities. I was unhappy with my life and the decisions I was making, and I was holding other people. I couldn't face the fact that I was self-creating that. It was too painful. How can I torture myself? It must be other people. So I did. I aimed it at my brother. I aimed it at other people, and that's the work I'm doing now.
So it started with you getting. It took you basically to go to a place of complete illness and darkness.
Yeah.
For you to come out of it and to start analyzing it.
Totally.
So at the age of 30, everything was looking great on the outside, and then you get terribly ill.
Yes. And that looks like me at my desk at work, getting less and less proactive, less and less energetic, feeling off over like 6 months, barely getting through the day, going from a guy that would work all day long, go to the gym for 2 hours after, 6-7 days a week. I mean, you couldn't stop me. I was so energetic. And all of a sudden, I'm not me. Something's wrong. Something's changed. I can, I'm just.
And it was happening over the course of 6 months.
Yeah.
Did you do anything about it during the 6 months?
I did. I did a lot about it. I went to hospitals, doctors. In the UK, there's a national healthcare system which is free, but the quality
you probably pay for it in taxes a lot.
You pay for it in taxes a lot, but then even
it's
worse
like Canada.
than that,
When people in the US are like, you have free healthcare. I'm like, we don't have
it's
free
not
healthcare.
what it sounds.
It's a lot of money. Yeah.
And beyond that, it's even worse that you pay the tax, you go there and the help is almost useless.
Yeah.
So, and actually, I don't want to feed any sort of narrative around Western medicine and healthcare in a negative light, because I know what that is, and it is fantastic in the right situations.
Absolutely.
But to speak the truth, I didn't get any help through the national health system.
So you started to feel like you're lacking in energy tremendously.
Dizzy, tired, joint pain, brain fog, lethargy, stomach issues, just off.
Yeah.
Systemically off. And I ended up going to private doctors and spending my own money. So like I got to a point of about 10 grand.
Did you guys have private
have the option.
healthcare clinics? Okay.
In the UK, you can go and you can skip the waiting line, It's the same doctors, but you basically get to the front of the list. So I did that. I did blood tests. I did cameras internally. I did scans. I did every test you can think of. I spent a lot of money. And I got to the end of that road, and they're basically like, it's psychosomatic. You've got anxiety, you're depressed. There's some antidepressants. That was the end of that road 6 months in. I found that very hard to accept, but I was so stressed and overworked, self-created, but overworked, that I was considering it. I was like, maybe I am. You know what? I'm so stressed. I'm working so long every day. I'm a young guy with a huge responsibility. What I felt, this was my experience, I have to validate it because it sounds like I'm a martyr and I'm complaining, but I felt overwhelmed. I felt like at that age I had way too much responsibility. I didn't have much training and much guidance. I did have my dad to look at and these things, but I had to sort of figure a lot of it out. And I just felt like I wasn't doing well. I was very self-critical. I'm a perfectionist, OCD type A, And so I was critical of myself. If I wasn't really getting it done at that level every day of the week, I was really suffering for it internally, like punishing myself. Mm-hmm. So I considered it. I was like, maybe I'm actually getting depressed. Maybe I'm burnt out. And because that's what you do when you've done all the tests and the testing.
Of course.
What do you think?
And I mean, doctors are in a way in a position of authority, right? You want to listen to them. That's why you go to the doctor.
That's why you go.
Yeah.
And at that time, I totally respected them. I totally would put my life in their hands. That's all I ever knew.
Right.
Why would I not?
Did you end up taking it?
So I didn't take any antidepressants because I'm egotistical male and I'm Italian, half Italian, whatever. And I'm like, what? Antidepressants? What am I, soft? That was egotistical.
Oh my God, I'm telling you, Italians are exactly the same as our people.
Yeah.
It's like whenever, I remember I told my mom when I was like 17, I'm like, Mom, I think I'm depressed. And she's like, You just have too much time on your hands.
Yeah.
You need to go study harder and work harder.
You're not busy enough.
Yeah.
I mean, they laugh in the face of depression. Like, we're trying to survive. What the hell is depression? So I did have that mindset. I did have that mindset. And the problem is the symptoms didn't go away and they kept getting worse. That was the problem. So the final straw is I walk into a doctor's office for the millionth time. And this time he puts this medication on the table and he says, look, we think there must be a deep-rooted bacterial infection that we can't find. You know, you've got these symptoms. You're obviously not crazy. You're coming back to me again and again. We think there's probably something, you know, really in there that the test isn't finding. And here is what we call a broad spectrum antibiotic. I'm going to explain why I'm making that gesture, which will nuke anything that's hidden in there and you should be okay. So I've been sick for quite a while at this point. I'm also under a lot of pressure. This was during COVID. So my business, the family business, you know, we're all working very hard to keep it going. And I don't really have time to rest and get better, to be honest. That's how I felt. I felt like my responsibility and expectation was to get back at my desk and keep the thing pumping. The country was falling apart.
I was just going to say, during COVID, it was like triple, fourple pressure that you would get.
Triple pressure.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of responsibility, a lot of self-imposed expectation of myself. It's my responsibility. I'm the young, energetic guy. I've got to protect my family, my dad, you know, overworking.
It's almost like a sense of identity for you. Hey,
really,
it's like, no, I don't accept. Yeah.
It was my identity, actually.
Yeah.
It's true. So anyway, I took these tablets. I got these tablets. I took them. And the motivation behind doing that was to get well, to carry on with my busy life.
You were like, I don't have time to get sick. I'm just going to take whatever,
Whatever it takes. Because this isn't after a week. This is after 6 to 8 months of feeling really unwell. And then that was the beginning of the beginning of this journey. You know, that was like the turning point. You know, a bomb went off essentially in my body. So what these drugs ended up being was ciprofloxacin, which is a class of antibiotics in something called a fluoroquinolone. And, you know, I found out much later that these drugs are basically black box warning. They're designated for end-of-life care only, so last resort. You know, you're dying in bed in a hospital and there's no other option, or you know, there's all these warnings attached to them saying disabling and permanent side effects. Wow. And so they gave this to me at 30 years old for something they didn't even know I had. You know, maybe I didn't even have an infection. It was a speculation.
And they didn't know it either, right?
And I don't necessarily think this doctor knew the potential for damage. I actually think the information they're given, they don't know the extent of the danger. I actually think they believe that, sure, all medication probably has a potential side effect.
Right.
And they're making these decisions, you know, offsetting the benefit risk ratio. I'm sure that this guy is an evil genius at a desk trying to kill people.
Yeah.
But the fact is that he gave me a drug which changed my life forever in a young age. And I'm not unique in that. You know, being 4 years out from that experience, and I'm going to talk more about what's happened during those 4 years, but I know personally, you know, through forums, through support groups, through whatever, the internet, there's so many mediums of communication now. I know about 10,000 people, and I can't tell you their names, but I can go there right now and send a message and they'll all receive it. You know, we're all in this network. And these are guys in their 20s and their teens, male, female, globally. Ireland, New Zealand, Australia, America, Russia, you can go anywhere in the world. And these are young people in wheelchairs. Some of them can't lift their arms. Some of them are like being spoon-fed, dribbling. A lot of people die pretty quickly after taking it. A lot of people kill themselves after taking it because of the severity of the symptoms. So it's a pretty extreme situation. It's really extreme, and it sounds extreme when you explain it. It sounds like all of a sudden I'm entering a realm of extremism. That doesn't sound right. How could that be? How could it honestly be prescribed by doctors on the market and be that dangerous? And unfortunately it is. And it's the truth. And so I take this medication, and 3 weeks after taking it, I basically can't walk from my bed to the toilet.
3 weeks?
Yeah. 3 weeks after I took it, I was at home in bed with my then fiance, and I turned to her, I remember, and I said, I don't feel right. And I had this like neuropathy in my skin. So basically it was a feeling like my skin was on fire, like burning on my whole body. And I turned like that to get out of the bed, and I didn't have the strength to either push up with my arms or my legs. I couldn't actually even turn to begin the movement of leaving the bed. And so I looked at her and I was like, I didn't even know what to say to her. I was confused.
Yeah.
And then I went online. I don't know why. Picked up my phone. Because if you're in that situation, you start thinking, what could this be? What have I done recently? Where's this coming from?
Right.
And I thought, I just took that antibiotic.
That's the only thing that kind of
It's
changed.
the only kind of thing I did. What else could? And I just typed into Google like ciprofloxacin side effects, and as soon as I did that, it was like a horror movie in front of my eyes. It was so intense. I saw newspaper articles of guys in wheelchairs. I saw these YouTube videos of people sitting, talking about they've been in their bedroom for 10 years and not left the bed. You know, I just saw everything that you could imagine that would scare you to death. And I'm sitting there in the position knowing that I'd just taken this stuff.
Right.
And feeling the way I was feeling. So I was in shock. I must have been in shock. Yeah. And I phoned my parents. My mum came to the house first, I think, and then my dad came shortly after, and I'm showing them these articles and these videos and saying like, I don't know what to say, but I can't stand up. You know, I can't stand up right now. And they're looking at me like, what? All of us are like, what? Me too. So that was day one. And then obviously we learn more and more. Time goes by, we go back to the doctor, we tell them what we're going through. We're told that it's not possible, that it could be the medication, and that they offered me more antibiotics. That was the solution. So I went back home, and obviously at that point the realization that I'm not going to get help from the institution. I have to try and help myself.
Which is a hard pill to swallow already, because those are like, that's a trustworthy professional who you're supposed to trust, right?
It's a lonely place to be, because you know, you look at educated professionals with machines and resources as an option for help, and when they're the guys that have potentially hurt you, and also the response to it is almost like dismissive and cold and actually accusatory, like you're making things up almost.
Right. Yeah.
That was a hard place to find myself. So what happened from there is basically I moved home with my parents for lack of ability to take care of myself. I left my home that I shared with my then partner, went back home, and it was a cumulative. So actually as the months went on, I got sicker and sicker. It wasn't
Did you stop taking it right away?
Yeah, I stopped taking it for sure.
Yeah.
And
so the effects lingered. It basically
they actually
messed something
build.
up. They build.
The way that they damage the body is they affect the mitochondria of the cell. These drugs, they're labeled as an antibiotic, but essentially they were introduced in the 80s as a chemotherapy agent for cancer. So the pharmaceuticals put that on the market to treat cancer, and it didn't do a very good job at that. You know, it wasn't actually healing many people, and so it had antibacterial effects, it had other properties, and rather than scrap it, they declassified it to an antibiotic, a broad spectrum medication that could potentially aid in other serious infection.
So like, we're just going to kill everything.
So it's a nuclear bomb. You know, they describe it as machine gunning a mosquito. You know, that's the overkill side of it, where it's catastrophic for the body. So
like, we'll kill the potential bacteria that you may not have, but we'll also kill absolutely everything else in your body as well.
Yeah, and not everybody's in that exact path. Some people have a really serious infection, and they take that to save their life.
Right.
And I can understand that.
Of course.
But a lot of people, and I mean a lot of people, are young people that have no type of issue that requires that kind of response. There's so many other options, other drugs, other therapies, there's other options than these super powerful, broad spectrum antibiotics. And I'm not sure you can call them antibiotic, if I'm being honest.
Right.
I honestly feel like
anti-all bio.
Anti-life. You know, the
Right.
mechanism in these drugs, a traditional antibiotics goes into the body and it kills bacteria.
Yeah.
And that's why people have stomach issues, they take probiotics after
Yeah.
they go on these regimens, because it's indiscriminate.
Which is something, by the way, interesting thing. But in North America, in Canada at least, that's the only place that I've taken antibiotics aside from my motherland. When they prescribe antibiotics, this is a tangent, but I have to share this. they don't prescribe this anti like fungal medication that they prescribe where I come from. And that medication, you're supposed to take it on like day 3 and 7 to make sure that your stomach doesn't get messed up, because otherwise you're at a risk.
It's
and
so
I remember
interesting.
I went to a doctor when I was supposed to take antibiotics in Canada, and I was like, hey, what about this fungal medication or whatever? And he's like, what take probiotics? Kind of thing. Yeah.
No, I hear you on that. And Russia and the Eastern Europeans have actually been way ahead of a lot of Europe and the rest of the world for a long time in alternative, natural, softer approaches, preventative. I really respect that part of the world for that. And this is what I'm speaking on, is a traditional antibiotic goes in the body, it kills good and bad bacteria. And you're left with candida, fungal issues, and dysbiosis of the microbiome. And you have to address that after. So the difference in that and the medication that I took is this goes into the body and it shuts down replication of the healthy cell. So it's actually not just shutting down bacteria, it's actually shutting down the replication of the cellular health, the mitochondria. It damages that process, it interrupts that process to the point where your entire body shuts down. Energy production, musculoskeletal issues, you have neurological effects, complete dysbiosis of the stomach. I mean, it's systemic damage. And it's because it's actually hitting you on a cellular level. It's not a traditional bacterial killer. It's altering the nuclei DNA in the mitochondria, and that is a big problem. That's a very serious problem, because when your cells aren't replicating in a healthy manner, you're in a bad position.
Right. Because
that's why people over a period of 6 months to a year after this drug, they actually get worse and worse, because it gets you to a state of damage, and potentially your cells are now replicating in this new damaged way, rather than the traditional mitophagy or apoptosis system within the body, which will just recycle old cells and create healthy new cells. It interrupts the process, and it leaves you potentially replicating in an unhealthy way. So the effects of that, the downstream effects of that, are varied and catastrophic. I know so many outcomes that are very, very sad. And in my own journey, and what happened to, I can only speak on me really today, but this is what I learned, and I realized where I was at, and I was very scared, I was very confused, and I was the worst version of myself that I'd been my whole life.
Yeah.
Because I'm in a room in my parents' outhouse, everybody around me is not sure what's happening. I'm trying to understand it, let alone tell them.
Right.
It's so instant and crazy, and like, how can people even go there with me? So now there's a question of like, is this guy okay?
Yeah.
Like, is he losing his,
Yeah.
Is there a mental health issue here? And that was a hell of a place to be. My body was literally failing me. I could barely walk, could barely talk and communicate and think. I mean, I was forgetting that people came to visit me after an hour after they'd left. I was in a really bad place. Musculoskeletal system, I was having like full body tendonitis. I was having like brain flashes, like my vision was like flashing as if someone had like a camera going off in my face all night long. I could list 50 things I was going through. It was absolutely systemic. Eyesight, heart rate. I mean, it damaged my heart. 4 years later, I still have heart issues. So it was a really severe experience. And this is where I found myself. And I was a very bad version of myself. I was desperate for help. Mm-hmm. I was so confused. I was so sick. And now I'm in the point where I'm like, guys, like, this thing's happening to me. I need your help. Everybody, like, do you know how serious this is? I'm probably going to die here. I'm not going to get through this. Like, you guys have to stop everything. Stop what you're doing right now and run to my aid. This is how I was acting and how I felt, because I was so desperate. Mm-hmm. I'm just aware that I was really operating from a place of fear and confusion at that point. And I just want to acknowledge that, for the people in my life and for myself, like forgiving, in terms of forgiveness and letting things go and moving on and shedding that, because that was such an intense period where I was super sick. It really was a very real, very scary situation. And I was leaning on the people around me way too much, but I didn't really have any other ideas on how to help myself. And
there wasn't much you could have done. You were completely...
I was lost.
Yeah.
I was lost, confused. So I just want to acknowledge that and like hopefully I get the opportunities going forward to, now that I'm in a clearer space, I understand what was happening, and I have a better quality of life, and even just like cognitive ability. I'm thinking clearer, I'm more coherent. Now that I'm in that place, I'm hoping that I get these opportunities to come back to these people and do that work to repair those relationships,
But you can't blame yourself. You were in a really terrible place to be.
I think part of it is forgiving.
Physically, mentally, right?
Yeah, I have to forgive myself before I can even enter into conversation with these people. My family, my friends. I really was like, why aren't you getting this? Why are you not helping me more? Why are you not treating it as an emergency? And looking back, it was just a totally unrealistic expectation of them. They weren't responsible for what happened to me, and it wasn't, anything that they'd done wrong. And I was just a really desperate person, and operating from that frequency, terrible place. So we'll see. I'm hoping that part of my journey is the resolution of those conflicts that happened in those early days of me seeking help and definitely not doing it in the right ways, So that's something I want to speak on. And but going forward from that, it was a long time in bed in my parents' outhouse, learning what happened to me and trying to empower myself. How can I get well? How can I get better? And I went through a really typical phase or journey that people go through when they get these long-term chronic conditions. There's a really similar path that people walk. If it's Lyme disease, if it's IBS, if it's Crohn, there's a really similar set of options that are available to all of us. And I just ended up going on that journey. And initially in the early days, most people turn to nutrition. That's a really accessible tool, and a lot of people eat really healthily and clean and try and figure out what's working for them. And I definitely went very heavily into that. And nutrition is a huge part of health, and I'm glad that I, pursued that knowledge, and I still use it to this day. But I did that. I did, nutritional IVs. So now I'm going to regenerative medicine doctors. I'm getting heavy dose IVs, ozone therapy. I bought myself for my house infrared sauna, hyperbaric oxygen chamber, frequency rife machine.
All the biohacking things that,
I
so
mean,
you went out of sort of the traditional modern day medicine, because obviously it kind of, didn't help you.
I felt at a dead end with that stuff,
yeah.
And I did. I went into the alternative regenerative medicine stuff, and thank God I had resources. I don't know where I'd be without that things that I had, and I invested a lot of money in tools and gadgets and machines. And I went down that road, so nutrition, and then biohacking, and hyperbaric oxygen, sauna, cold plunge, something called a frequency rife machine, which is actually, I think, originated in the Russian technology, where they're using frequency sound waves to treat conditions. So I had this whole therapy room going on at home. And I did that for a long time, and I wasn't getting to any sort of quality of life, and I was really suffering, and I felt very stagnant and very desperate still. And I ended up getting on a plane to California. I went to see this doctor who's marketing himself as basically a Cipro doctor. So he's marketing that he understands what the drug does, and he took it himself supposedly, and he's got this.
He specializes in the recovery from, I guess, that,
He's advertising that he's got a protocol to combat the side effects and get people back to health. And I was so desperate. These things weren't working, and I wanted my life back.
Right.
So I got on a plane. My dad wheeled me on the plane, not in a wheelchair. So this is now 8 months into the experience.
You were in a wheelchair.
I was in a wheelchair. I mean, at that point, I couldn't walk long enough to stand in the queue at the airport or walk on and off the plane. So it wasn't that I was completely paralyzed. At home, I was able to shuffle to the toilet, to the kitchen, and back to the bed. But any long, sustained energy output, I just collapsed.
Those of you who are watching this, and if you're not watching this, I urge you to just take a look at this. If you're listening to this on video, just look at this guy now. Anyways, that's a side note.
I'm very, very grateful for the progress. So grateful.
Yeah, so you flew to California.
California, spent a lot of money, regenerative doctor. I was there for a month. I did all of this experimental and frankly dangerous things. I was injecting myself with growth hormone and peptides and crazy stuff. I was a man at the end of his rope. I really felt like I was actually going to lose my life. Still 8 months in, I was seeing no end. And it was actually feeling like my body was shutting down. I honestly felt like I was going to die. That was my mindset. So I was doing the point I'm making is I was doing anything and everything I could, flying around the world, spending the money, the gadgets, and when I'd exhausted that, when I really got to a point where I was satisfied that I'd tried everything, because you have to try. I think people when they're desperate and that ill, they want to try the cure, they want to try the remedy. You can't just tell someone, give it time, rest, things will get better. So, I mean, when you're that sick, you're like, get me the cure. So I had to go through that for my own sanity. I had to try everything and spend the money. And I didn't get much better, if any better. I think I was in the exact same place after all that effort. So at that point, I come across the information surrounding circadian biology, circadian rhythm, quantum physics, and essentially I started reverse engineering my problem. I got to a point where I said, okay, what is the problem? The problem is that I have mitochondrial damage. The cells in my body are damaged and they're not producing enough energy to run my immune system for me to function. So if that's the problem, how do I reverse engineer that specifically and stop trying to think about overall wellness? How do I target the problem? And that led me down to the teachings of people like Dr. Jack Kruse, and there's a guy called Doug Wallace, who's a mitochondrial doctor in Philadelphia, and these world leading experts in this field, cellular health. Mm-hmm. When I came across this literature, they're speaking on things like utilizing the sun, mm-hmm. utilizing the earth, grounding, bare feet, and basically they're talking about the fundamental ways that as a species, as a human species, how do we generate energy in the body? And when you go back to the simple basics of that, how we evolved for a millennia or however long we've been here, we were drawing electrons from the ground through our bare feet, and the body takes these elements from the earth, electrons, converts it to energy in the body. We were taking the radiation from the sun above us and literally converting that. So you've got electromagnetic radiation from above and below charging the human body. We're literally like a water-based battery. This is the understanding that I came to. As a biological entity, I realized how we function and what we're made of outside of the dialogue you hear in Western medicine. And that made me feel very empowered, because now all of a sudden there's something else to try that I haven't tried, but it also really resonated. This is how our species evolved. This is how we developed these innate immune systems and this incredible intelligence where we overcome viruses and bacteria and sickness. And it was in this environment, this natural environment. Right. This rapid acceleration of industrialization and housing and healthcare, and this is a very short window. Yeah. We're very new to this stuff as a species. So then it really connected to me. It resonated that before all that, for a long, long time, all we had was nature. And the teachings were fascinating. You talk about the science around the decrease in inflammation in the body by spending an hour with your feet on the ground. I mean, the thermal radiation scans of these guys that have systemic inflammation that's literally neutralized to zero just from grounding. Just from
standing on the ground barefoot.
Barefoot.
Something that you probably can't do in most North American cities right now, because parks are covered in all sorts of stuff, right?
That's part of it.
Yeah.
It's part of the problem. Why we have epidemic sickness is the environment we're in. It's a big part of the conversation. So I'm a year in, I'm in London still, I'm very sick. I come across these teachings and I'm scratching the surface. It's very complicated work. I'm very sick. My cognitive abilities are very impaired, and it's taking a long time for me to understand it and absorb it. But I do get to the point where I realize that this is probably the way out for me in terms of cellular health and recovery. So at the same time I have that realization, I also realize that the geographical location I'm living is not supportive to these teachings. There's barely any sun.
Which was London.
London, cold, damp, rainy. Yeah. All the things I need to be outside with minimal clothing on, barefoot.
Yeah, to reset your circadian rhythm with morning sun. There's no morning sun probably for most of the year, right?
It's very difficult.
Yeah.
Access to clean food, being...
I've heard that's an issue, a big issue.
Well, I think globally, in large cities and urban centres, I think it's an issue in a lot of the world. I think avoidance of electromagnetic radiation from cell phone towers, neighbours' Wi-Fi. You're in densely populated communities in the UK. And the studies around the cellular reactivity to like non-native electromagnetic frequencies and like mold in the homes and all of these pillars of suppression of the immune system, I was basically living in them all.
Right.
So that was a hard truth, because now I'm facing having to leave everything I've ever known. I'm sick. I've lost my business, well, my identity to the business and what I was to that business.
Yeah.
My relationship broke down. It was very hard for her to be in relation with someone for years, and overnight this person changes. And he's not the same anymore, and there's no guarantee on the outcome and what's going to happen. I mean, I think she went into shock or something, and I completely understand that. And that relationship broke down. So that's all.
What a huge mental hit for you.
It was
that
a lot.
Would have been, like, aside from all the physical
It was a lot.
that you were experiencing, physical illness, what a hard reality to face of all of that breaking down.
It was a lot at once.
Yeah.
It was a lot at once. And I didn't handle it well at all times. It's not like I displayed, poise and.
Well, but like, how would have expected you to? Like, that's just illness in and of itself is enough to, I don't know how I would have handled it.
Yeah. So it wasn't easy. And then, facing the truth that if I do believe in these mitochondrial specialists and the fact that, mitophagy and cell turnover and healthy replication of cell is greatly aided by high UV index sunlight, being grounded, being away as much as possible from, non-native radiation and black mold in the house and high quality nutritional food. If I believe in these truths, which I really did at that point, it came with a move. It came with a complete change of lifestyle. So I start researching, and this was, say, August, that I'm really getting to the point where I'm like, this is what I need to do to save my life. And I'm in London, and I say, okay, I'm going to go to Italy. I've got heritage, I've got family, we have a physical house there. I'm going to go. It's warmer, it's better food, I'm out of here. Went to Italy, and initially I was like, this is the answer. I'm feeling good about this. This is the first step to recovery. And I quickly realized that, like most of Europe, they have a pretty strong winter. So I got there in September. By the end of October, I'm freezing cold. I'm feeling sick again.
So the cold would make you feel sick.
Yeah, my symptoms to this day, 4 years out, they ramp up to this day.
Wow.
If I have a cloudy day here, I get immediately sicker.
Wow.
My thinking, my energy, literally my pain in my body, it like amplifies immediately.
So it's the sun that's keeping you.
It's essentially, I'm plugged in. It's essentially like a cell phone. What I'm doing is I'm in such a high energy environment. Anything above a UV index of 6. So the sun has different spectrums of light, different times of the year. And, in the morning sunrise, it's like high infrared light. That's why it's glowing red. You see that spectrum of light, and it's a mix of that and some blue and some green. But circadian rhythm is a concept that your bodies have internal clocks, and everything is run in sync with the environment. Especially for females, hormonally and all these functions in the body, it really is governed by being aligned with that rhythm. And so you wake up with the sunrise and your body shuts down melatonin, which is the sleep hormone, the repair hormone, and it increases cortisol, it increases progesterone, pregnenolone, testosterone, estrogen, all these things that you need to function in the day. Hunt, forage, build, have sex, the human functions. It's all tied to the spectrums of light that we're under. We're actually electromagnetic beings.
Have fun watching this if you're living in Canada or the UK.
It's very hard to hear.
Yeah.
And the truth is, you can live healthily in these environments, but the discipline it takes is insane.
Absolutely.
We're in the modern age where you can replicate nature to an extent. I don't think so entirely, but red light panels and there are some infrared saunas. There are ways to generate energy and plug yourself in. However,
but for you that wasn't an option. You had to go full in.
I wasn't in a situation where I had a mild case.
Right.
I was debilitated. And I had to go for it. If I had a chance at recovery, I had to go all in. And I knew that was near the equator. I did my research and I knew that equatorial countries have high UV index strength sun all year round.
Right.
You know, UVA, UVB, these are all spectrums of sunlight that disappear in the northern hemisphere for the winter. So you're talking about Canada, UK, Iceland, all of these northern hemisphere areas, you can only make vitamin D between like May and September. The whole rest of the year, you're not even accessing these spectrums of light. And so you're using stored vitamin D. And this is okay. And you can live like that. You survive like that. But you better be healthy in the first place.
Right.
And you better have your nutrition dialed in. You better be eating local, seasonal food that is available at that time of year ancestrally. You better not be eating sugar, pineapples and mangoes at Christmas because of the sugar content.
Or strawberries.
It's not in match with your light environment, and then the body actually receives it as a confusing code. Basically, the truth behind nutrition, if you want to know about what nutrition is, you can hear all this stuff online and these fads. You want to know how to eat properly and well. All food is matter condensed into light. So an orange, an apple, a carrot, it's sunlight that shines on the earth and grows a vessel that it stores its energy in. That's what food is, all food. So the reason it's important to eat locally and seasonally is we're sitting here now and it's March and it's about a UV index of 7. So if I go and eat a pineapple right now, the light code and the information and the energy stored in that food matches the exact light that we're sitting here that's hitting our skin in this conversation. And that is the basis of perfect nutrition. Say for a comparative scenario, it's December right now, the sun's not shining, and I go and eat the same pineapple. That light code is mismatched. The light that's hitting my skin is way less strong. It's of a different equatorial location, because I was probably be in London or Canada where the pineapples don't even grow. And these foods have content in them, deuterium, hydrogen, isotopes. There's these parts of food that the body almost can't break down and use unless it matches the strength of light it's existing under. It's very complicated. And you can go...
So you've restructured your whole life to solely live based on the circadian rhythm and the sun.
Because it's the answer to my problem.
Right.
It's not the answer to everyone's problem.
Right.
The problem that I have as a mitochondrially impaired human is that I need to generate healthy cells. I need to rebuild my cellular health. And the only way to do that is cell turnover. And there is a few ways to do it. The concepts are mitophagy, which is governed by circadian rhythm. You make your melatonin in the day under the sun. You make it during the day. You release it at night when it goes dark. So from the moment that your environment turns dark, 4 hours from that moment, 4 hours from the very last piece of light that your eyes and your skin see or receive, your body floods with melatonin. At that point, you're in rest and repair, you're in recovery, your cells are healthily proliferating. All the damage you're doing to yourself when you're sleeping, it's undoing itself. The problem that we've got in our modern environments is most people are interrupting that process for years and years and years. And that's why that is actually the foundation and basis of most sickness. Why you're getting these huge influxes in stage 4 cancers and all of these like death sentences is because it gets to night time, we flick the lights on, put the TV on, we check our cell phone, say till 11, 12 p.m. at night. So we still haven't got to the point where our body's released any melatonin. Then we fall asleep. Maybe 3, 4 a.m. you wake up to pee. The bathroom light goes on. You've just immediately interrupted your melatonin again. Your body is so receptive to its environment and light.
Be in the dark.
Be in the dark.
I do that.
Yeah.
If I have to pee at night.
And it's very science heavy,
Yeah.
and people can look into circadian rhythm and quantum physics, and especially if you have mitochondria issues. And anything like Parkinson's, ALS, dementia, any of these neurodegenerative diseases are rooted in mitochondrial issues. So they all have different words and labels. They're all the same thing. And the way out and the way to improve your quality of life is the same answer.
That's so interesting.
So I would say look into that.
We're told that sun's so bad for you. We've been told for years that sun's bad. Stay out of the sun. Don't be in the sun for a long time. And I'm really starting to realize that that's kind of BS.
If you look at a map of melanoma, skin cancer cases, if you look at the global map, it's all in the northern hemisphere. So the countries that have the highest strength sunlight in the world all year round have nearly no cases of skin cancer. Why is that?
Wow.
Because in the northern hemisphere, well, first of all, we don't get enough. And when we do get it, we put sunglasses, hats, and sunscreen on. And actually, the studies are suggesting that the lack of sunlight, the lack of connection to the environment, and, to be frank, the chemicals in the products that we're putting on our body are actually causing the skin cancer. So yeah, basically you mentioned like it feels like it's the opposite of what we're told in a lot of situations. And I don't know if I want to be pessimistic and be like, don't trust anything they say, it's the opposite. I just say, advocate for yourself, look into it, research, make sure that you're comfortable with what you're doing and the information that they're giving you. Because sometimes there is a middle ground, a grey area, or sometimes it is the opposite, but it's not always that extreme. But I would definitely say there's always more to the official dialogues and the official guidelines and recommendations.
Of course, no kidding. You're the living example of that.
Yeah.
Like if you knew what that drug would do, right?
If I knew.
So Luca, you went from being in a wheelchair,
Mm-hmm.
being unable to care for yourself basically, to look at yourself now.
Doing better.
You're doing better, much better. That journey that took you from that place to where you are right now, if you were to reflect on something that you would say is the most important, be that mental, be that nutrition-wise, what was it?
Yes, I love the question. I think everything is cumulative, and the food and all the steps, they all contributed to a better outcome. But the season that I'm in now, this journey, I mentioned that everybody goes on a similar path with these health issues and they try everything. And I do feel like ultimately we all arrive, these long-term sufferers, these long-term conditions, we all arrive in a place where we realize that freedom is within and there is no external savior coming. There's no one coming to save you. You really burn out with this energetic subcontracting of your health and your life, putting it in people's hands and like this next protocol, this next treatment, you can't keep riding that wave of like anticipation and hope and then ultimately letdown. Mm-hmm. And so I really feel like we all arrive in a place where I am the medicine, it's me. And that looks like going in, developing a relationship with self, truly looking at yourself, even in the face of like, my situation is an external assault, it's a toxicity, it's a poisoning. So it's not a breakdown of my bodily functions naturally. Mine was actually artificial synthetic poisoning. But even in that scenario, I fundamentally, in this stage of my healing, believe that the way home is introspection. Now you're talking about somatics, you're talking about neuroplasticity, you're talking about the ability to co-create.
A lot of mindset work. A
lot of mindset stuff. You can actually shape your belief system to the point where your biology catches up and your symptomology and your experience changes. I've been working on, like I spoke on earlier, the victim mindset, and this happened to me because of that person and this circumstance, and all these things happened to me. The mm-hmm. world happened to me, and I'm a victim, and I'm, poor little boy. And actually, the growth and healing and expansion that I've felt lately by taking responsibility for my healing and ownership, and actually putting that stuff down, and saying it couldn't have happened any other way. Where I am right now in this chair, all the things that happened, there is no amount of wishing, resenting, and forcing it couldn't have happened any other way. I was meant on this lifetime, on this journey, to lose my health at the age of 30 years old. And that's a very hard acceptance. But if I don't accept it, therein is the suffering. If I resist that and fight that to the point where I'm trying to crucify the doctor, the pharmaceutical company, this is energy and this is frequency that is keeping me stuck. And I am honestly now in a place where I see so clearly that, my freedom lies in radical responsibility. It's not my fault that I got sick, but it's absolutely my responsibility that I heal. And I'm taking that in my own hands, and I'm doing that by being really honest with myself. Even before that medication, I was on a downward spiral in my life and my behaviors. I was overworking. I was not connecting to lovers, friends, family properly. I was suppressing my emotions, my needs. I was not connected to myself. I was not honoring myself. I was pushing these things down. I was dishonoring my essence. And like when you get to this place where you realize everything is everything, you look at Dispenser, you look at Dr. Kathleen King, you look at Peter Crone, you look at these amazing people that are advocating and pioneering neuroplasticity, where the brain cannot tell the difference between an imagined experience and an actual experience. So now you're in the realm of endless possibility. You've got this health condition. I mean, I'm 4 years in, my heart beats too fast. I've got these really quite serious things going on. And I've been given this gift of trust and surrender and actually moving towards it. It's so paradoxical that the act of trying to fix and trying to, repair and figure it out, that is a state of tension and conflict, and that keeps the entire immune system and nervous system in fight and flight. And the actual radical act of accepting what is and what happened entirely.
And taking responsibility.
Taking responsibility. And being like, this was meant to happen to me. And I don't understand that. I don't have to understand that. Like,
right.
Why would I have to lose my health as a young man when I had dreams and aspirations and I had a plan? The suffering is that you had an idea of what your life was going to be, and it's something completely different. And the distance between those two concepts is the suffering. If you can really move towards the symptoms, and you can be gentle with yourself and have compassion for yourself and forgive yourself, it's scary. It doesn't feel good to have your heart racing. It doesn't feel good to have all these unknowns and these fears. It doesn't feel nice. But can I move towards it, and can I be with it? And can I actually embrace it and let it know that it's not alone? Can I talk to my inner self? Can I be with my inner child and wrap them in safety and actually understand that, as I say, paradoxically, the more you can embrace what is and move towards it with patience and compassion and understanding, the symptoms actually, they dial down because the nervous system is perceiving safety.
It's all connected.
It's all connected. Your mindset and the way you treat yourself, it has a ripple effect on your physical experience. And you can, just like you do yoga, just like you can learn an instrument and a new language, you can teach the body a language of safety. Through repetition, through intention, through a self-relationship. And that pours out in everything you do. You show up to a relationship, to your parents, your brothers, you show up to life with a better understanding of yourself. The ego, there's two egos and they both want to be right. You're arguing with your partner, you're arguing with your friend. We are very ego-led. And when you can operate from a place of genuine love and compassion, every situation, every experience in life, whether it's ill health, whether it's anything I can list right now, there's so much less resistance. You get to the actual destination that you want to be experiencing way quicker. It's funny because you think if you're sick, you really want to fight back.
Right.
You want to stay in a state of empowerment. I want to eat the right thing. I want to go to bed early. I want to avoid all this stuff. And that is a scarcity, fear-based mindset. The actual relaxation into what is the hard truth. My lifetime might be cut short. I might have ill health for the rest of my days. I might not be able to do a million things that I have plans, physically or otherwise. Athleticism, it might be gone for me. And actually the acceptance of that and finding what is for me within that experience and the lessons and what is on my path that I can see gratitude in and beauty in, that in itself will actually aid in my recovery, my symptomology, my nervous system. And that I can talk about the science, and I spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, regenerative medicine, machines, and I'll tell you right now, the most progress I ever made was embracing nature and going back to my natural environment and developing an honest and radical sense of responsibility and a relationship with myself, my inner world, and looking at my subconscious patterns, the way I do things, the way I learned things when I was a young child in my environment, copying people, figuring out how to be liked and survive and love, and asking myself, are they healthy behaviors? Are they contributing to the life that I want to experience? And if they're not, being honest enough with myself to start again and go back to these situations and people and saying, I'm sorry, I love you, I'd like to try something new.
Yeah. So it's a lot of self-reflection and a lot of mindset work.
A lot.
Aside from the nutrition and the basics that you would think about when you would go for fixing the health. I'm really happy that you're sitting here next to me, looking very healthy.
Thank you, I'm trying.
And Thank you so much for your time, Luca. I appreciate you sharing your story.
I had a great time.
Likewise.
Yeah.
You mentioned a few names. I'd like to grab them after this episode and probably link it for you guys to have some resources, because I know you are all going to be curious about all the mindset work, maybe some nutrition books, any resources that Luca can share with you. I will also link your contact if you're down for it, and your page. I hope that you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I will see you next week, and in the meantime, stay blessed.